The rain in London doesn't fall so much as it negotiates. It presses, it hovers, it slides along your coat collar like a hand that has been there before. By the time I reached the stop, its glass shelter glowing like an aquarium on the edge of Putney Heath, I was damp in ways that felt personal. My umbrella had turned inside out twice, and the wind had laughed at me both times. The streetlights smeared into gold commas on the wet road. A fox watched from a hedge, calm as a landlord. The number 14 arrived with a sigh, its headlights cutting a tunnel through the drizzle. The doors opened, and warm, stale air met my face. Diesel, damp fabric, someone's takeaway chips, the faint citrus of cheap disinfectant. I tapped my oyster, climbed aboard, and chose a seat on the lower deck, halfway back. Not the front, too exposed. Not the back, too close to other people's secrets. Halfway back meant you could pretend you were alone even when you weren't. There were maybe 8 passengers. A woman with a pram at the front, 2 teenagers sharing a single earbud and 1 hoodie, a man asleep with his mouth open, a paper bag on his lap as though it contained something important, a suit with an exhausted face, and diagonally across from me, a stranger who looked like he had been waiting for this bus specifically. He wore a charcoal coat that didn't shine with rain the way mine did. His hair. He sat straight, knees together, a tote bag resting on his lap like a patient animal. He was looking at me. Not in the crude way men sometimes look when they think you're something to assess, or the absent way people stare through you when they're lost in their own worries. He looked as though he'd been given a photograph of my face and told to confirm it. The bus pulled away, the wipers thumping. Putney Heath fell behind, swallowed by dark trees and the slick curve of the road. I told myself it was nothing. London is full of strangers looking at you for reasons you'll never know. Maybe my hood had flipped up weirdly. Maybe I'd sat in his favorite seat. Maybe he thought I was someone he knew. I pulled my phone from my pocket and checked the time. 9:47 p.m. I'd been at the office far too long, attempting to convince a client that people do not enjoy being lied to by a toothbrush brand. My brain still felt like it had fluorescent lighting inside it. I slipped my earphones in and pressed play on something gentle. Piano, rain sounds, nonsense meant to sand down the edges of thought. The bus rumbled along, stopping, starting, stopping again. The city outside looked like it had been painted in watercolors and then left out in the weather. At Putney Bridge, a few people got off, a few got on. The stranger remained. At Fulham Broadway, the suit with the exhausted face got off. The stranger remained. At a stop I didn't catch because I was busy rewriting an email in my head, the woman with the pram disappeared. The bus grew quieter. The teenagers hopped off laughing, their faces lit briefly by the screen of a phone. The sleeping man woke, blinked in betrayal, and stumbled off as if the bus had moved him without consent. And then it was only me and the stranger, plus the driver separated from us by the glass partition that made him look like an aquarium fish. The stranger shifted his tote bag slightly, as though making room for a thought. I felt his gaze again and tried to ignore it, the way you ignore a mild toothache, by concentrating on anything else and hoping time does the work. The bus stopped at a red light. The interior lights hummed softly. The stranger spoke. "You always sit halfway back," he said, conversational, as if we'd been doing this for weeks. I looked up. My earphones were in, but the volume was low enough that his words cut through. I pulled one earbud out. "Sorry?" I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were calm in a way that made my stomach tighten. "You always sit halfway back," he repeated. "It's the safest place on the bus. You can see enough.
You can leave quickly. You can pretend you're not part of anything. My throat went dry. Do I know you? I asked. No, he said, but we're on a schedule. The light turned green. The bus lurched forward. I put my earbud back in, as if a piece of plastic could protect me from a sentence like that.
But the stranger leaned forward slightly, and his voice came again, low and clear. I need you to listen, he said, because I'm going to tell you about a killing that hasn't happened yet. London teaches you a certain kind of restraint. You learn to keep your face neutral when someone cries loudly on the tube. You learn to step over a man asleep in a doorway without letting your eyes linger. You learn to pretend you don't hear arguments behind thin walls. You learn, above all, that engaging with strangers is a choice, and sometimes the safest choice is no choice at all. So I did what every sensible Londoner does when confronted with a sentence that belongs in a police report. I stared at him and laughed once, a short sound with no humor in it. Right, I said. Okay. He didn't react. He didn't look offended or amused. He just watched me with that calm expression, like a lecturer waiting for the class to settle down. I'm not asking you to believe me, he said. Not yet. I glanced toward the driver, but the driver's eyes were fixed on the road. The glass partition reflected the bus lights and my face, making us all look slightly unreal. The stranger's hands rested on his tote bag. His fingers were long, clean, nails trimmed. A man with a tidy life, or a man who wanted you to think so. I pushed my earbud back in, turned the volume up, and looked out the window. The city slid past, shop fronts shuttered, pub windows glowing, the occasional late-night cyclist pedaling through the rain like a stubborn idea. Red taillights made ribbons on the wet streets. The stranger continued anyway, undisturbed by my attempt to disappear. It will be a clean killing, he said. No screaming, no headlines until morning. The kind of death that looks like bad luck if you don't know where to look. My fingers tightened around my phone in my pocket. I didn't pull it out yet. Pulling it out felt like admitting I was in something. Stop, I said softly without looking at him. I'm not interested. You are, he replied, because you're already listening. I hated that he was right. Who are you? I asked. He tilted his head as though considering which version of the truth to offer. A man with a story, he said, and tonight I'm going to tell it properly, start to finish, because rehearsal matters. The word rehearsal made my skin prickle. He leaned back and spoke as though he were reading from memory, each sentence placed carefully on the line of time. It begins with a man named Malcolm Rook, he said. He is 52. He wears a wedding ring, but hasn't been married for a decade. He drinks too much espresso. He thinks he's invisible in a city like this. I looked at the stranger sharply. The name meant nothing to me. You don't know him, the stranger said, answering my expression, but you've seen him. He stands too close to the curb. He checks his phone without looking up. He pushes past people as if they are furniture. The bus turned, and the upper deck footsteps of someone moving made the ceiling creak. I realized with a jolt that we weren't alone. Someone was above us, silent, unseen. The stranger didn't glance up. Malcolm Rook will die tonight, he said, at 10:23 p.m. The precision was obscene. At a bus stop, he continued. One specific bus stop. Not this one, not here, but you'll recognize it when I say it. I swallowed. Hyde Park Corner, he said. My stomach dropped a fraction. The number 14 did pass Hyde Park Corner. I knew that in the casual way you know landmarks you don't think about until they appear. Hyde Park Corner meant traffic, tourists even at night, the cold statue silhouettes, the smell of wet grass and exhaust. It will happen right as the doors open, the stranger said. He will step off the bus with the wrong foot first. He will hesitate because it's raining, and he doesn't want to ruin his shoes. That hesitation will be enough. A horn blared outside. The bus slowed for a moment, then moved again. I forced myself to breathe through my nose. This is insane, I said. Yes, he agreed, but it's also true. I pulled my phone out now. The screen lit my palm. My battery was at 12%, of course. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. To give a confession, he said, as if that was the simplest thing in the world. And to make sure there is a witness who understands it. I'm not a witness, I said. He smiled again, small and controlled. You are, he said. You just don't know what you're witnessing yet. There are certain details you don't forget about London buses. The way the seats hold the cold in winter, even when the heater is blasting. The way the windows fog and everyone draws accidental art with their fingertips. The way the floor vibrates under your shoes like the city's heartbeat. And the way, sometimes, you hear a stranger's voice and your body decides before your mind does that something is wrong. I could have gotten off. I could have rung the bell at the next stop, stepped out into the rain, and let the bus carry the stranger away into someone else's night. But my brain, brilliant at creating worst-case scenarios, supplied a new fear. What if the stranger followed? He had said we were on a schedule. Schedules have destinations. The bus stopped to let someone on, a woman in a long waterproof coat, hair frizzed from the weather, holding a violin case like it was a shield. She nodded at the driver and moved toward the back. Her eyes flicked briefly over me, then over the stranger, then away. I felt ridiculous relief at the presence of another person. The stranger paused his narration until she sat, 2 rows ahead, near the aisle. She didn't put the violin case in the rack. She kept it close. Then the stranger resumed, as though he'd been waiting for a certain audience size. Malcolm Rook thinks he is meeting someone, he said. He believes he is the one arranging the meeting. In truth, he is the one being arranged. I stared at the rain streaking down the window. Outside, Chelsea blurred by, expensive darkness, the kind that smells faintly of money even in the wet. You're describing a murder, I said. I'm describing a correction, the stranger replied. The woman with the violin case shifted slightly. I couldn't tell if she was listening. Most Londoners are experts at eavesdropping while pretending not to. Why tell me? I asked. Because, he said, you are the only person on this bus who will do something. My pulse thudded. I don't even know what you're... He cut in, still calm. You do. You're already calculating. You're already planning what you would say to the driver. You're already imagining what the police would ask you later. You're already considering whether the violin woman would back you up. I hated how accurate that was. My mind had been sprinting in circles since he spoke. I opened my messages and typed to my friend Tessa. On bus, weird man talking about murder at Hyde Park Corner. Am I losing it? Then I hesitated, thumb hovering. Sending it felt dramatic.
Not sending it felt dangerous. I hit send. No signal. Of course. The bus had dipped into a pocket of dead reception, like a deliberate choice by the universe. The stranger watched me with quiet interest, as if he could see the failed message like it was written in the air. "Don't waste your battery," he said. "You'll need it later." The violin woman's head turned slightly, just a fraction. She definitely heard him. I leaned forward and lowered my voice. "Are you threatening me?"
"No," he said. "If I were threatening you, you'd feel it. This is different." He reached into his tote bag slowly, not suddenly enough to trigger panic, but deliberately enough that my muscles tightened. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and placed it on the seat beside him. A printed bus timetable. He tapped it with one finger. "We are here," he said. I didn't move. "I'm not looking at that." "You don't have to," he said. "You already know. The number 14 is predictable. That's why it's useful." Useful. My mouth tasted like metal. The stranger continued. "At 10:23, this bus will be at Hyde Park Corner, if the traffic behaves, if the lights cooperate, if nothing interrupts the line of fate." The bus slowed again, crawling now behind a line of cars. Brake lights bled red into the rain. The stranger's gaze remained steady. He wasn't worried about being late, because he wasn't guessing. He was following something he trusted. "Tell me about the killing," I said, surprising myself. His eyebrows rose slightly, the closest thing to satisfaction. "Good," he said. "Now listen properly." He spoke like someone reading a bedtime story, except the story was built from knives. "Malcolm Rook gets off at Hyde Park Corner," he said. "He thinks he's meeting a woman. Her name is not important. Names rarely are. He thinks she's impressed by him. He likes that feeling. It makes him careless." The violin woman stared fixedly at the window, but her posture was tense. I noticed her fingers gripping the handle of her case, knuckles pale. The stranger kept talking. "Malcolm steps down. He turns left, toward the underpass, toward the darker pavement where the trees block the streetlights. He checks his phone. He doesn't notice that his ticket has already been validated for a return journey he won't take." A shiver ran over my arms. "Validated?" I repeated. The stranger's eyes flicked to my Oyster card resting in my hand like a worry stone. "You know how the system remembers you," he said. "It holds your little movements like a diary. Tap in, tap out. Proof that you were where you said you were. Proof that you weren't where you weren't." I forced a laugh that sounded wrong. "You're talking about bus fares like they're evidence." "They are," he said simply. The bus turned onto a broader road. The city became more central, louder even through the rain. I saw the blur of Knightsbridge, the glow of a late-night pharmacy, a taxi cutting sharply into a lane. "Malcolm Rook dies," the stranger said, "because he believed the wrong story." The phrase hung there, unsettlingly poetic. "How?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted. The stranger looked past me for a moment, as if checking the reflection of his own words. "He is pushed," he said. Not dramatically, not like in films, just a firm hand at the wrong moment as he steps off the curb to cross. A bus, another bus, clips him. The impact is enough. His head hits the pavement. The rain washes the rest away. I exhaled. It was horrible, but it was also plausible.
It wasn't a theatrical stabbing, it was a city death, the kind that could happen by accident. Except he was describing it like a planned performance. The violin woman's breath caught. She turned her head and looked directly at the stranger now. "Stop," she said. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "What the hell are you doing?" The stranger looked at her politely, as if she'd asked him the time. "Telling the truth," he said. "Why?" she demanded. "Because it's late," he replied, "and because the bus is nearly on time." Her eyes narrowed. "Is this a prank?" The stranger's smile was almost kind. "No." She looked at me. "Do you know him?" "No," I said. The word felt weak. No sounded like not enough. The violin woman shifted forward as if to stand, then stopped, as if reconsidering whether leaving her seat would make her part of this. "What stop did you say?" she asked him. "Hyde Park Corner," the stranger answered. Her face paled slightly. She swallowed. "That's my stop." I turned toward her. "What?" She stared at the stranger as if he'd stolen something from her. "I get off at Hyde Park Corner," she repeated, more to herself than to us. "Every Thursday night. She stopped, as if catching herself. "I'm going to rehearsals." Rehearsals. The word landed like a punch. The stranger's gaze warmed, barely. "Then you understand why preparation matters," he said. The violin woman's voice shook. "Are you saying someone will die there tonight?" "Yes," he said. "And you're just calmly telling us?" she whispered. "I've done it before," he said. "The calm comes with repetition." The bus hit a pothole. The windows rattled. I felt a coldness spread through my chest like ink in water. "Before?" I said. "What do you mean, before?" The stranger looked at me for a long moment, then spoke softly, almost gently. "I mean," he said, "you have heard this confession already."
My first instinct was to deny it, because denial is a small shelter you can build quickly. "I haven't," I said. "I've never seen you." The stranger nodded as if I'd answered correctly on a test. "Not with your eyes," he said, "but you've heard my voice. You've read my words. You just don't remember them yet." The violin woman's breathing had gone shallow. She clutched her case tighter. "You're insane," she said. "Perhaps," he conceded, "but insanity doesn't validate bus tickets, does it?" A chill slid up my spine. He leaned forward and, without asking, held out the timetable so that I could see the printed times. His finger traced the line, stopping at Hyde Park Corner. 10:23. "You see," he murmured, "we are heading exactly where we should." I didn't take the paper. I didn't want to touch anything he owned, but my eyes flicked over it anyway. It was a normal timetable, slightly smudged with rain, folded and refolded until the edges were soft. Normal objects are the worst. They make abnormal things feel possible. I pulled my phone up again and tried to call emergency services. No signal. The violin woman tried too, her thumb moving fast, her face tight. No signal. The stranger watched us both with the patience of a man waiting for a kettle to boil. "You won't get service until we're closer," he said, "and by then it will be too late to be helpful." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice sharper now, anger bubbling up through fear. "If you're actually planning something."
"I'm not planning," he corrected. "I'm remembering." That was worse. The bus stopped again. A man got on, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. He smelled of cold air and cigarettes. He nodded at no one and moved toward the back, sitting behind the violin woman. Now there were 4 of us as witnesses, plus the driver. The stranger's voice lowered, becoming intimate, as if he were telling a secret at a party. "Malcolm Rook is not the first," he said. "He is simply the one you will notice." My fingers curled into my palm. "So there have been others?" He didn't answer directly. "London is full of people who vanish quietly," he said. "They call it the city of strangers, as if that's romantic. It's not romantic, it's efficient." The Violine woman's eyes were bright with tears she was refusing. "I'm getting off before Hyde Park Corner," she said abruptly. "Next stop, I'm leaving." The stranger's gaze flicked to her, mild. "If you do," he said, "you will be late for rehearsal." She blinked. "What?" He continued, unhurried, "And the conductor will be irritated. And you'll apologize, and he'll say it's fine, but it won't be fine. Not really. You'll feel it in the way he avoids your eyes." Her mouth opened, then closed again. "How do you—" "You are thinking of the piece in your case," he said. "You're thinking of the run of bars where you always rush. You're thinking you promised yourself you wouldn't rush tonight." She stared, frozen. The man behind her shifted, suddenly attentive. I felt my own heartbeat hammering. "This isn't a confession," I said. "It's a performance." The stranger's expression softened, almost appreciative. "Yes," he said, "that's what makes it dangerous." The bus rolled on toward the bright center of the city. Outside, the rain eased, and for a moment, the streetlights looked clearer, sharper, like the world was focusing. The stranger leaned back, hands on his tote bag, and spoke the next line as though he'd been saving it for the right moment. "And now," he said, "I'll tell you what Malcolm did to deserve it." You could argue that nobody deserves to be pushed into a road, but the stranger spoke as if he were reciting a moral balance sheet. "Malcolm Rook sells certainty," he said, not openly, not like a preacher, more subtle. He works in development, property, permits, community projects. He stands in rooms with expensive carpet and convinces people that their discomfort is progress. The violin woman's jaw tightened. The stranger continued. "He also collects things. Not art, not antiques, stories. He collects people's worst moments and keeps them like trophies." My stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" "He records them," the stranger said. "Conversations, arguments, confessions. He keeps them in tidy folders, labeled by date. He uses them when he needs them." My fingers went cold. I thought of my own job, my own world of emails and contracts and polite manipulation. I thought of how easy it is for someone to keep a record. The man behind the violin woman exhaled sharply, a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Sounds like half the city," he muttered. The stranger turned his head slightly, acknowledging him without fully looking. "Yes," he said. "That's why he survived so long." The bus swayed around a corner. I saw through the window the edges of Hyde Park coming closer.
dark trees like a wall. The stranger's voice became quieter, more controlled. Malcolm has a list, he said. Names. People who have something to hide. People who have done something desperate.
People who have lied to themselves and then to others. He calls it leverage. He calls it insurance. The violin woman's eyes flicked to me, uneasy, as if she suddenly wondered whether she was on that list. I wanted to say, "This is ridiculous." I wanted to laugh again, but something about the stranger's certainty made laughter feel like a luxury. "And tonight," he said, "Malcolm thinks he is meeting one of those names, a woman who wants her secrets back." I swallowed. "Is she real?" "She is as real as the story he believes," the stranger replied. "He will step off the bus. He will look for her. He will check his phone. He will see a message that says, 'I'm here. Come closer.'" My phone buzzed in my hand. I nearly dropped it. A notification, finally, a signal flicker, lit the screen. A message from an unknown number. "I'm here. Come closer." My breath caught so hard it hurt. The violin woman saw my face and leaned forward. "What?" she whispered. I turned the screen toward her. Her eyes widened. She looked from the phone to the stranger. He watched us both calmly, like a magician waiting for applause. "You see," he said softly, "the city is full of stories, and tonight, one of them is about to become a fact." I tried to type back, "Who is this?" but my hands were shaking. Before I could send anything, another message appeared. "Hyde Park Corner, 10:23, don't be late." The stranger tilted his head as if listening to something we couldn't hear. "Time," he said. The bus's digital display ticked forward. 10:14. 9 minutes. The man behind the violin woman sat very still now. I noticed his hands were tucked inside his jacket pockets. I couldn't see what he was holding, if anything. I forced myself to look at the driver. The driver's head was slightly turned, as though he'd caught fragments of conversation in the mirror. I stood, legs shaky, and walked toward the front. The stranger didn't stop me. He only called after me, gently, almost kindly. "Be careful what you say," he warned. "Words can be weapons, too." I stopped behind the yellow line, close enough to the driver to be heard, but not close enough to feel like I was invading his space. Drivers have their own invisible boundaries. Cross them, and you become a problem. "Excuse me," I said. The driver glanced in the mirror. He was middle-aged, tired, with the kind of face that had seen every kind of human drama without getting paid enough for it. "Yeah?" he said. "There's a man on the bus," I began, and immediately hated how flimsy it sounded. He's saying someone's going to be killed at Hyde Park Corner." The driver's eyes narrowed slightly. "What?" He's talking about it like it's planned, like it's going to happen when we stop there." The driver's jaw tightened. He looked at the road again, then at the mirror. "You saying he's got a weapon?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "but he's calm, too calm, and I just got a text from an unknown number about Hyde Park Corner." The driver's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You got signal now?" he asked. "For a moment," I said. He nodded once, quick and decisive. "Sit down," he said. "I'll call it in." He reached for his radio and spoke in a low voice, the kind drivers use when they don't want passengers to panic. I caught fragments. "Possible disturbance. Passenger claims threat. Hyde Park Corner." The radio crackled back, too fast for me to catch. The driver glanced at the mirror again, watching the lower deck behind me. "Which one?" he asked.
I turned carefully.
The stranger sat exactly where he'd been, hands on his tote bag, posture perfect. He looked like he belonged in a newspaper photograph labeled Witness. "He's in the charcoal coat," I said. The driver's eyes flicked. He nodded. "Right," he muttered. "Keep your phone ready. If you've got signal, dial 999 and keep it on the screen. Don't hang up unless they answer. Understand?" I nodded, throat tight. "Go sit back down," he said. "Try not to do anything that sets him off." Sets him off, as if he were a machine. I returned slowly toward my seat, aware of my own breathing, aware of the bus's hum, aware of every small sound. As I passed the violin woman, she whispered, "What did he say?" "Driver called it in," I murmured. Her face flickered with relief and then fear again. Are we safe?" I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted that to be true. The stranger watched me return as if he were tracking a timeline. When I sat, he spoke immediately. "They'll send someone," he said. My skin crawled. "How do you know?" "Because that's what happens," he said. "You try to intervene. Authority arrives. Everyone breathes. And then the story continues anyway." The bus hit another red light. We were moving into the brighter heart of London now. More cars, more headlights, more life. The stranger leaned forward slightly, voice low. "Tell me," he said. "What did you tell the driver?" "That you're talking about killing someone," I snapped. He nodded, pleased. "Good," he said. "Now the driver is part of it too." That's what you want, I realized, and the thought turned my stomach. You want more witnesses. He smiled faintly. "I want the confession to be undeniable," he said. The man behind the violin woman shifted. I saw the edge of something dark in his pocket. A handle. A phone? My imagination filled it with a blade. The stranger's gaze flicked past me for a fraction of a second, acknowledging him, and then returned to me. "Soon," he said. The bus's clock ticked. 10:18. 5 minutes. Outside, Hyde Park's trees loomed like a black wall. The road widened. The traffic thickened, as if the city itself were slowing down to watch. The stranger spoke again, softer now, almost intimate. "I should tell you the hardest part," he said. "It's not the pushing. It's not the timing. It's choosing who gets to live afterward." My mouth went dry. "Who gets to live?" I repeated. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his tote bag again. This time, he pulled out a photograph. He held it up so only I could see. My breath stopped. It was me. Not a selfie, not a social media photo. A candid shot. Me on this bus, weeks ago maybe, looking out the window, unaware. On the back of the photograph, in neat handwriting, were 2 words: halfway back. Panic is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet, cold blooming behind your ribs. I stared at the photograph until my vision blurred around the edges. "You've been watching me," I whispered. The stranger slid the photo back into his tote bag as if it were nothing more than a receipt. "I've been listening," he corrected. "Watching is crude. Listening is intimate." My hands shook so badly I had to clasp them together. "Why me?" I asked. He studied me as though I were a puzzle he already knew the solution to. "Because you are the kind of person who believes stories matter," he said. "You don't like to admit it, but you do. Even your job is about persuading people to feel something. You understand narrative." "That's," I started, then stopped.
My job had been a throwaway detail in my own head. I had never said it aloud. The violin woman stared at us now, openly. The man behind her was leaning forward slightly. The whole bus felt like it had shrunk around us. "Answer me," I said. "Why me?" The stranger's voice softened. "Because you were there once," he said. I blinked. "What?" "You don't remember," he continued, "because you trained yourself not to. London teaches that too, but you were there." My mind tried to scramble backward through my life, searching for Hyde Park Corner in memory. I pictured the traffic circle, the underpass, the whetstone. And then, like a door opening in a corridor I'd avoided, I saw it. 2 years ago, late, rain again, a bus stop near Hyde Park Corner.
A man stumbling at the curb, a sudden shout, a body hitting pavement, my own hands frozen around my phone. I remembered the sound more than the image, the dull, awful thud, and then the city continuing as if nothing had happened. I remembered giving a statement to a police officer under a streetlight. I remembered being asked if I saw who pushed him. I remembered saying truthfully, "No, I didn't see." Because I hadn't, or because I hadn't wanted to. My stomach lurched. I began, and couldn't finish. The stranger watched me with quiet satisfaction. "Now you remember," he said. "Good. Memory is the first step of confession." "I didn't do anything," I whispered. "No," he agreed. That was the problem. The words stung like a slap. Outside, the lights of Hyde Park Corner began to appear ahead, brighter, busier, a knot of traffic and wet stone. The bus slowed. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the unknown number. "Look up." I looked up, heart hammering. Through the front window of the bus, I could see the stop ahead, Hyde Park Corner, its shelter glowing, people clustered beneath it like shadows under glass. And among them, a man in a dark coat stood perfectly still, looking directly at the approaching bus. Even from this distance, I could see his posture. Straight, tidy, patient. He lifted his hand slightly, not a wave, more like a signal. The stranger beside me spoke, almost tender. "There he is," he said. "Malcolm Rook." The violin woman made a small sound, horrified. She whispered, "That's not..." She stopped. Her eyes were locked on the figure outside, because she recognized him too. "Do you know him?" I asked her, voice shaking. She swallowed. Her throat worked. "He sponsors the orchestra. He's been at rehearsals. Her voice broke. The bus slowed further, indicator clicking, easing toward the stop. 10:22. 1 minute. The driver's radio crackled. His shoulders tensed. He glanced at the mirror, then back at the road, as though weighing choices. The stranger leaned toward me, his voice barely audible over the engine. "This is the part where you decide," he said. "Do you stay seated and let the story repeat? Or do you stand up and change the ending?" I stared at the stop ahead, at Malcolm Rook, waiting like a man expecting a delivery. My mouth went dry. The bus's brakes hissed. The doors began to open. Time didn't slow. Not truly. It just became sharper. Each sound gained edges. The pneumatic sigh of the doors, the slap of rain against the pavement, the murmur of traffic, the tiny beep of someone tapping their card. The bus stopped fully at Hyde Park Corner. The doors opened, and for one suspended moment, nobody moved. Even the driver seemed to hesitate, as if he could feel something in the air that wasn't weather. Outside, Malcolm Rook stepped closer.
He didn't look like someone waiting for a bus. He looked like someone waiting for a person. His eyes scanned the interior. They landed on me. A jolt went through my body, violent enough to make me flinch. The stranger beside me spoke softly. "He remembers you too," he said. I forced my legs to move. I stood abruptly, stumbling into the aisle. The violin woman gasped, "What are you doing?" I couldn't explain it. Explaining felt impossible, but my body was moving before my mind could talk it out. I walked toward the open doors, heart hammering so hard my vision pulsed. The driver glanced at me in the mirror, eyes wide with warning. I stepped down onto the wet pavement. The air outside was colder, cleaner. The rain had eased, but the ground was slick. Malcolm Rook stood a few meters away, under the shelter's glow, his face lit from below in a way that made him look carved. He smiled at me. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone recognizing a duel. "You're late," he said. My throat closed. "Who are you?"
I forced out, even though I already knew. His eyes flicked briefly toward the open bus doors, as if checking whether the stranger was watching. "Someone who's been trying to get your attention," he said. "Someone who needs you to remember properly." Behind me, I heard footsteps. The violin woman had stepped off too, holding her case as if she could strike someone with it if necessary. The man behind her lingered at the doorway, half in, half out, watching. On the bus, the stranger remained seated. He looked out through the window at us with serene focus, like a director watching actors hit their marks. Malcolm Rook stepped closer. He smelled faintly of expensive aftershave, clean and sharp. His hair was perfect even in the damp. His eyes were bright with a kind of hunger. "Do you know why I chose this stop?" he asked. I stared at him, unable to speak. "Because of the underpass," he said. "Because of the blind angle. Because the CCTV doesn't cover the curb properly when the rain is like this." My blood turned to ice. He leaned in slightly, voice low. "Because this is where you learn to look away." The violin woman made a strangled sound. "What are you talking about?" Malcolm's gaze flicked to her with irritation, like she was an unexpected extra. "This isn't about you," he said. But she didn't back away. She stepped closer, chin lifted. "If you're threatening her, it's about me too," she snapped, surprising even herself. Malcolm's mouth tightened. From behind us, a shout rang out, sharp, authoritative. "Oi!" I turned. A police officer running toward us through the rain, hand on his radio. Another followed behind. They moved fast, slipping slightly on the wet pavement. Relief crashed through me, so hard my knees nearly gave. The driver must have gotten through. They must have... Malcolm's expression didn't change. He didn't look surprised. He looked satisfied. "Ah," he murmured. "Right on time." Then, without warning, he reached into his coat pocket. The officer shouted again, louder, "Hands where I can see 'em." But Malcolm didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a phone. He pressed the screen once, and the bus behind us, the number 14, gave a sudden, violent shudder. A sound like something heavy dropping. A scream from inside. The driver's horn blared, long and panicked. My head snapped toward the bus. The stranger was no longer seated. He was standing, and the driver's partition glass was spiderwebbed with cracks. Chaos arrives in waves. First the shock, then the noise, then the scramble of bodies trying to become safe. The police officers pivoted instantly, sprinting toward the bus. One shouted into his radio, The other grabbed for the bus door as more passengers, people I hadn't even registered, stumbled out, faces white, hands up, shouting over each other. The violin woman clutched my arm. "What happened?" she whispered, terrified. I stared, frozen, at the bus's front window. The partition glass had been struck from the inside. Someone had hit it hard. Through the confusion, I caught a glimpse of the stranger on the lower deck, calm even now. He wasn't fighting, he wasn't fleeing. He was simply moving. He stepped toward the open doors with the slow certainty of a man finishing a scene. The driver was hunched over, one hand pressed to his forehead where blood, just a small amount but vivid, mixed with rainwater. An officer climbed aboard, shouting commands. And then the stranger stepped off the bus. He walked onto the pavement like a man disembarking at his stop after work. He glanced at me, and in that glance I saw something colder than violence. Approval, like I had done what I was supposed to do. He turned and started walking away, into the crowd. My body reacted without thought. I ran after him. The violin woman shouted my name. Though she didn't know it, it came out as a wordless plea, but I didn't stop. The stranger moved smoothly through the wet pavement and people's umbrellas, never speeding up, never looking hurried. He threaded through tourists and commuters like he belonged between them. "Stop," I called, my voice breaking. He didn't stop. I pushed past a couple holding hands. I nearly collided with a man carrying a takeaway bag. My shoes slipped on the wet curb, and my heart hammered like it wanted out. The stranger reached the edge of the underpass entrance, dark, echoing, smelling of damp stone, and paused. He turned to face me. For a moment, the noise behind us faded, muffled by distance and the curve of the concrete. "You shouldn't follow," he said softly. "What did you do?" I demanded, breathless. "What did you do to the driver?" He tilted his head, almost sympathetic. "Nothing permanent," he said. "A shock, a disturbance. Enough to bring authority, enough to make the stop. Interesting." "You planned that," I said. He nodded. "Of course." "Why?" My voice shook. "Why tell me all of this? Why drag me into it?" The stranger's eyes held mine. "Because Malcolm Rook isn't the one who needs to die," he said. My stomach lurched. "What?" He stepped closer, the underpass darkness behind him like a mouth. "Malcolm Rook is a decoy," he said. "A visible villain. Something simple for the police to chase. A story that makes sense." "Then who?" I began. The stranger's expression tightened, the first flicker of emotion I'd seen. "The killing," he said, "is you."
The words punched the air out of me. I stumbled back half a step. "I'm not," I started, but couldn't finish. The stranger watched me with an intensity that made the damp air feel thin. "Not your body," he clarified. "Not yet, but your life. The part of you that still believes you can remain untouched, that you can sit halfway back and observe without consequence." My throat burned. "You're insane," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "Perhaps," he said again, "but you remember Hyde Park Corner now. You remember the man who died. You remember how you didn't look." I swallowed hard. "I didn't push him." "No," the stranger agreed, "but you let him vanish into the city's noise. You gave your statement. You went home. You slept. And the next day, you told yourself it was simply London." My eyes stung. Behind us, distant sirens began to wail. The police presence was growing. Malcolm Rook would be questioned. The driver would be tended to. The bus would be searched. And still, the stranger stood before me, calm as a judge. "You can't do this," I said, voice cracking. "You can't punish me for being human," he offered. "No, I'm not punishing you. I'm offering you a chance."
A chance to what? I demanded. He leaned closer, voice low. A chance, he said, to stop the next one.
The underpass amplified sound. Each drip of water from the ceiling became a metronome. "You're talking in riddles," I said, trying to steady myself. "Stop the next what?" The stranger's gaze flicked past me, toward the open area where the stop and the bus were visible in the distance. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "Do you know what Malcolm Rook does with stories?" "He blackmails people," I said, because that was the simplest version my brain could hold. "Yes," he said, "but more than that, he curates them, he edits them, he chooses what the world believes happened." I stared at him. "And you're different?" The stranger's mouth tightened. "I'm corrective," he repeated, like an old justification. He reached into his tote bag again, and this time I didn't flinch. I was too tired for flinching. He pulled out a small digital recorder, the kind journalists use. He held it between two fingers. "This," he said, "is Malcolm's favorite tool. He hides it in meetings, in cafes, in rehearsal rooms. He gathers confessions that don't belong to him." The violin woman's words echoed in my head. He sponsors the orchestra, rehearsal rooms, sponsors, power. My stomach turned. The stranger pressed a button on the recorder. It clicked, and then a voice filled the underpass. Faint, tinny, but unmistakable. My voice. I heard myself speaking, shaky, from that night 2 years ago. "No, I didn't see who pushed him. It was crowded. I was looking at my phone." The sound of my own excuse made my skin crawl. The stranger turned it off. "Because he knew one day he might need it." "Need it for what?" I whispered, horrified. "To shape you," the stranger replied. "To remind you that you are not as clean as you want to be. To make you obedient." I swallowed. My mouth tasted like old fear. The stranger slipped the recorder away. "Tonight," he continued, "Malcolm intended to meet you, not because he wanted you dead, because he wanted you useful." "Useful how?" I asked. The stranger's eyes narrowed, a rare sharpness. "By making you witness a death again," he said. "By making you feel responsible. By pressing you until you agree to do something for him." I stared at him, mind spinning. "So you, what? You staged the bus disturbance to stop that?" He didn't answer right away. "I staged a distraction," he said carefully, "to draw police, to pull Malcolm into the light, to interrupt the script." My breath shook. "Then the death you described, Malcolm dying, was—" "A story Malcolm believes," the stranger said. "A story that makes him cautious. A story that makes him react." My hands trembled. "But you said someone would die at 10:23. The stranger's gaze held mine. "Yes," he said. My blood iced again. "If not Malcolm," I whispered, "then who?" The stranger looked past me toward the stop again, listening. He spoke quietly, almost regretful. "The man who will die," he said, "is not important to Malcolm. That's the point. It's collateral, a demonstration." I turned, sudden dread flooding me. "On the bus?" The stranger nodded once. "The driver?" I demanded, panic rising. "No," he said quickly, "not him. Someone else. Someone whose death will look like an accident. Someone who will become a headline if it suits Malcolm, and a footnote if it doesn't."
My heart hammered. Who? The stranger stepped closer, and his voice dropped. The man who got on behind the violin case, he said. The one with his hands in his pockets. I remembered the cap, the cigarette smell, the half-seen handle. He's still on the bus, I whispered. Yes, the stranger said. And Malcolm knows exactly what he's carrying. I stared at him, horrified. Then why are you here with me? Why aren't you stopping it? The stranger's expression softened into something like sorrow. Because, he said, I can't be seen stopping it. Not this time. My throat tightened. You can, he added, because you are already seen.
I ran back toward Hyde Park Corner like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. The rain had eased into a fine mist, the kind that clings to your eyelashes. The street lights smeared again. Sirens painted flashes of blue across Whetstone. As I approached the bus stop, the scene had changed. The number 14 was still there, doors open, hazard lights blinking. Police officers moved with purposeful urgency. A paramedic crouched by the driver, checking him. Passengers clustered under the shelter, wrapped in shock. Malcolm Rook stood a short distance away, hands raised, speaking to an officer with the practiced calm of a man who knows how to look cooperative without giving anything away. The violin woman saw me and grabbed my arm. "Where did you go?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "What is happening?" "No time," I panted. "The man behind you, where is he?" Her face went blank with confusion. He didn't get off," she said. "He stayed inside when everyone else." My chest tightened. I pushed past an officer's outstretched arm. "Wait," the officer snapped, but I didn't stop. I clanked back onto the bus, ignoring the wetness on the floor, the smell of fear. Inside, the lower deck looked wrong. The usual warmth felt contaminated. The back seats were empty, except for one figure. The man in the cap sat alone now, posture relaxed, hands still inside his pockets. He looked up at me and smiled. It was an ordinary smile. That was the worst part. "Evening," he said. I stopped 2 rows away, breathing hard. "What's in your pocket?" I demanded, hating how thin my voice sounded. He chuckled softly. "My hands," he said. Behind me, an officer stepped onto the bus, voice sharp. "Ma'am, step off, now." I didn't move. The man in the cap looked past me at the officer and sighed as though inconvenienced. "Always so dramatic," he muttered. Then his gaze returned to me. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. My skin crawled. "Why?" I whispered. He tilted his head. "Because you've made it personal," he said, "and personal things are messy." He shifted slightly, as if preparing to stand. My mind flashed to the stranger's words. Words can be weapons, too. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have strength. I had only my voice and my body and the fact that he was watching me. So I did the only thing I could think of. I told the truth, loudly. "I remember him," I shouted, voice cracking through the bus. "I remember the man who died here 2 years ago. I remember looking away. I remember lying about it because I didn't want to be involved." The words ripped out of me like something tearing free. The officer behind me froze, startled by the sudden confession. The man in the cap blinked, just once, a tiny crack in his calm. Outside, Malcolm Rook's head snapped toward the bus. I kept going, voice shaking but louder now. "I'm involved," I shouted. "I'm involved now. Whatever you're planning, whatever Malcolm's paying you for, I'm not looking away again." Silence slammed down for half a second. Then the man in the cap's smile vanished. He stood abruptly. The movement was fast, too fast. His hand came out of his pocket. Not a gun, a small canister, black,
palm-sized. My lungs seized. Pepper spray. He aimed, but the officer was already moving. He lunged forward, grabbing the man's wrist. The canister hissed, spraying wild into the air, sharp and burning. The bus filled instantly with a sting that made my eyes water and throat close. I coughed, stumbled back, blinking tears. The officer rustled the man down, shouting for backup. Passengers outside screamed as the commotion became visible through the windows. Malcolm Rook stepped forward, face tight with rage now that his clean narrative was cracking. And then, through the watery blur in my eyes, I saw it. The stranger, standing at the edge of the crowd, under the shelter glow, watching calmly. He met my gaze, and he nodded once, small and decisive, as if to say, that's the moment. That's the change.
It ended the way most real stories end, not with a neat conclusion, but with paperwork and exhaustion and the lingering taste of fear. The pepper spray cleared slowly, dragged out of the bus by open doors and cold air. My eyes burned for an hour afterward. My throat felt raw. The man in the cap was cuffed and taken away, still calm enough to be terrifying. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He simply looked at Malcolm Rook as if waiting for instructions that never came. Malcolm was questioned. He smiled too much. He denied too smoothly. He played the role of startled sponsor and concerned citizen, but the police were watching him differently now, I could tell. Not because they had proof. Proof is hard in a city built on plausible deniability, but because something about his composure didn't match the chaos around him. The violin woman sat beside me on the curb, trembling, her case clutched to her chest. She didn't make it to rehearsal. Neither did I make it home on time. We gave statements, we answered questions, we repeated the same details until the words felt like they belonged to someone else. And all the while, I looked for the stranger. I looked for the charcoal coat, the calm eyes, the tidy hands. He was gone. By the time the officers finished with me, the number 14 had been taken out of service. Its lights were off now, interior dark, like a carcass on the side of the road. Hyde Park Corner looked almost normal again, which felt like a cruelty. The officer who took my statement, a young woman with tired eyes, asked gently, "Did you know either of them?" "No," I said, and then hesitated. The truth felt complicated now. I remembered the photograph, the handwriting, the timetable, the way he'd said I'd heard the confession already. "I don't think so," I added. The officer studied me. "You said you received texts." I showed her my phone, the unknown number, the messages. She frowned. "We'll trace it," she said, though her tone carried the unspoken reality that tracing numbers is easier in fiction than in London. When she stepped away, I sat alone for a moment, staring at the wet pavement. My phone buzzed again. A final message. "Good. Now you'll look." I stared at it, trembling. Then, as if guided by instinct, I looked up, really looked at the CCTV camera perched on a pole above the shelter. Its little red light blinked steadily, always watching, always recording. My stomach tightened. I stood and walked closer, drawn like a moth to something dangerous. Beneath the camera, taped neatly to the pole, was a small laminated card, as if someone had placed it there for me to find. 2 words printed in bold black. Halfway back. I peeled it off with shaking fingers and turned it over. On the back, in the same neat handwriting as the photograph, was another sentence. Not a threat, not a confession, a reminder. The city only stays safe when somebody decides to be seen. The rain misted my face. The traffic roared. The park tree stood dark and patient.
Somewhere out there, the stranger moved through London as easily as a rumor. And I realized with a cold clarity that settled into my bones that the story hadn't ended at Hyde Park Corner. It had simply changed narrators. Because now, when I sat on a bus, I didn't sit halfway back for safety. I sat halfway back to watch. And in the reflection of the dark bus window, with the city smeared behind me like wet paint, I thought I saw a charcoal coat in the distance, just once, turning a corner, disappearing into the London night, as if it had never been there at all.